Good morning and welcome to CBI's EU Green Deal webinar. My name is Tonia Dabwe. I'm going to be your host and moderator for this webinar. Welcome. We're happy to have you. Glad that you could join us. So we're going to be talking today about the European Green Deal and how that is going to impact your business. And if you are a business support organization, we hope that this information is going to be useful to you to be able to support the companies that you work with. So as I said, my name is Tonia Dabwe. I'm your host and moderator today. I am the daughter of a Liberian father, Dutch mother, based in the Netherlands, and I run my own consultancy focusing on working with companies in Europe and Africa and focusing on business profitability, funding, and growth. For today, my main job is to make sure that everything is going smoothly and that you get all the information that you need. Let's start off with a few housekeeping issues. We are using GoToWebinar today. You may be familiar with it. If not, no problem if you run into technical issues. Our team is here in the background. We're waiting to help you. Should you run into any audio issues in the sense that you are kicked out of the webinar or you can't hear us, please log in again using the link that you received in your invitation email. And please note, we cannot hear you and we cannot see you. You also cannot hear and see each other, but you can see us, and if all goes well, you can also hear us and you can interact with us. And interaction will be through the questions tab. If you're on a laptop, if you look to the right of your screen, you're going to see a questions tab there where you can ask any questions or any comments that you have. And these are some of the housekeeping points here. So you'll see a chat box where you can enter any questions that you may have. We will do our best to answer as many questions as possible. We will have 2 Q&A sessions during the webinar, one about halfway through, which is about a 5-minute Q&A session, and we'll have a second Q&A session at the end of the webinar where we're going to try and answer any remaining questions. And we will be extending the webinar if we have a lot of questions coming in. If you're not able to make it, that's not a problem. Or even if you have technical issues and you get kicked out, also not a problem, because we are recording this webinar. And at the end of the session, we're going to send you an email with a link to the recording, with a link to the presentation, and also with a link to the European Green Deal study that CBI did, so you can read that at your leisure. So as I said, we're going to be talking about the European Green Deal today, and I would like to start off testing if everything is working correctly by asking you to fill out a poll. We know that we have participants, hundreds of participants actually today, from so many different countries, and would like to get a basic overview of where you are based. So could I ask you to tell us, where is your organization based? And I'm just going to take a minute to allow you to fill in the poll. Okay, see a lot of people from Europe and Asia. Some Africa as well, North America or Australia, South America. And I'm just going to leave it open for a couple of seconds to allow everyone who hasn't voted yet. We're at 76%, so a quarter of you that hasn't voted yet, just giving you a couple of seconds to fill out the poll. Okay. Last chance, 5 more seconds. And this is what it looks like. As you see, quite unexpectedly for me, Europe is mainly represented today. Maybe not all of our attendees have signed on yet, but we have a lot of people from Europe joining us today. Asia is very well represented. Africa less represented than I had expected. South America also less than I had expected. Like I said, maybe everyone is still getting ready to log in. And we have North America and Canada, and North America and Australia. And I happen to know that we have a few people from Canada and from the United States joining us today. So once again, welcome to all of you. We have a lot of information to share with you today, and to manage the time well, we are going to be focusing on just the key points from our study. So we're going to tell you the main things that you need to know about the European Green Deal, and our experts, whom I will soon introduce, will be telling us what exactly it is, what the key policies and strategies are, and also what exporters to the EU can expect. We will be asking you to tell us, after having heard part of the presentation, to tell us which policies and which strategies you want to hear more about, and we will then share that information with you. And we will also hear about some of the no regret strategies that businesses can start taking today, because even though the EU Green Deal has been published and we know that it's going to make its way into legislation, it's not yet actually been translated into legislation that controls and determines what businesses do. So how exactly do you prepare for that? We have a couple of no regret strategies while we're waiting for legislation to come through, that you can start taking right now. Please feel free to ask any and all questions in the chat. You can start right now if you've had a chance to read it or review it or have any questions, and we will pick them up in a Q&A session. For now, I am going to pass the mic to Arta Scheinhardt from CBI, who would like to say a few words. Welcome you to today. Hello, Arta.
Thank you, Tonia. I also have a couple of slides to share. If you could make me enter, then I'll try to put these up for everyone to see. There we go. Do you see some slides already?
Yes, I do.
Okay, so good morning, everyone. Maybe already good afternoon. I saw there's some people from Asia at the webinar today. Let me start by thanking all of you for joining us today. I also would like to send out a special welcome to the CBI partners from our Sustainable Development projects. I want to thank you for sharing this invitation to this webinar with your members, and last but not least, a very warm welcome to the many small and medium-sized enterprises from our current and former CBI projects who are joining us. Today, as said, we'll be exploring the European Green Deal, what it is, why it is important, and what consequences in terms of obstacles and opportunities it might have for your business to Europe in the coming years. For the people that do not know me, my name is Arta Scheinhardt, and as a program manager, I am together with 3 other colleagues responsible for CBI's market research. That's the research that you can find on the Market Intelligence platform on our website. For listeners who are completely new to CBI, let me shortly introduce to you who we are and what we do. So CBI stands for the Promotion of Imports from Developing Countries. We are a Dutch government organization, and we are funded by the Netherlands Ministry of Foreign Affairs. So as you can see on the screen, it is our mission to connect small and medium-sized enterprises like yourself to the European market and to create sustainable and inclusive economic growth. So the way we do this is by strengthening especially sustainability of SMEs in developing countries. So we encourage them to do exports of value-added products to Europe or to the local region where they're based. So we help with finding practical solutions to bottlenecks in the export value chain. And one such bottleneck is good market information. And that brings me to the goal of today's session. So you've probably heard about the European Green Deal by now, especially over the last couple of months. It received a lot of media attention. So in short, it's European legislation that cuts across sectors. So it does not really matter whether you're active in apparel or in home decoration, food ingredients, or any agricultural sector. If you export to Europe, sooner or later, you will come across it. And to help you understand the European Green Deal, to help you prepare for it, we have asked market research company Profundo to make a study about this topic. So today, the findings of this study will be presented to you, and we will discuss it within a panel who will be introduced shortly to you. From my side, that's about it. I hope that today's webinar will give you new ideas, inspiration, that it will help you take steps to improve and prepare your business for your next export success. I wish you all a very good session. Back to you, Tonia.
Thank you, Arta. And I am going to transfer presentation rights back to me. So I think it's time for us to get to know our experts, and I would like to invite Dania, Jasmine, and Hester to turn on their cameras and microphones. Welcome, Dania.
Hi, Tonia.
Hi. Hi, Hester. Hi, Jasmine. Welcome to the webinar. I'd like to invite you to introduce yourselves. And Dania, you're joining us from Amsterdam, and you work for Profundo, a market research company. Could you tell us a little about yourself?
Yes, so as Tonia said, I work for Profundo, which is a research consultancy based in Amsterdam. We do research, amongst other things, on markets, supply chains, and value chains. And I specifically coordinate Profundo's field work, but for my work, I analyze value chains, looking specifically at sustainability issues related to human rights, labor rights, and also gender considerations. I have quite a bit of experience. I have had the pleasure before to work for CBI, conducting value chain analysis in some countries in Africa. And well, I'm very pleased to be here today.
Sounds like we're going to enjoy hearing from you later today. And Jasmine, you are a colleague of Diana's from Profundo. What can you tell us?
Yes, that's right. So hi, I'm Jasmine. I work closely with Dania at Profundo, and I specialize in investigating supply chain links all over the world and for all sorts of commodities. But my background is in agricultural commodities, and it's a pleasure to be with you all here today.
We're interested to see how that translates into, for example, the Circular Economy Action Plan from the EU. And we're also very lucky to have Hester with us today. Hester, you work for the Netherlands Environmental Assessment Agency. Could you introduce yourself, please?
Hi, Tonia, thank you. Yes, so I work for PBL, which is the Netherlands Environmental Assessment Agency, as you said, as a researcher focusing on the impacts of the Dutch transition to a circular economy. The Netherlands has the ambition to become fully circular by 2050. And my work specifically focuses on what this would mean for low and middle income countries that the Netherlands is connected to through trade relationships. Thank you.
Okay, and 1 second, I believe the screen went off. Okay, thank you for those introductions. And I think now is the time that we move to Dania to kick off our very first presentation and tell us what exactly is this whole EGD and what can we expect from it. Dania, over to you.
Thank you. Just let me share my screen. I hope you're able to see it. Right. Okay. So yes, as Tonia was saying, I will answer the question. The first question I will answer is, what is the European Green Deal? Just a moment. And the European Green Deal is the European Union's response to the global climate emergency. It comprises a set of policies that aim to transform the European Union into a climate neutral and a resource efficient economy by the year 2050. The deal covers all sectors of the economy, from agriculture to energy and from transport to construction. And it includes key policies and measures such as the Farm to Fork strategy and the new Circular Economy Action Plan, of which we will be telling you a little bit more about in a moment. So the European Green Deal was presented on the 11th of December of 2019 by the European Commission, and it's the first set of legislative proposals was launched on the 14th of July 2021. These proposals included 8 policy areas, such as increasing the EU's climate ambitions for 2030 and 2050, also achieving zero pollution and eliminating toxic substances, producing and consuming clean, affordable, and safe energy, preserving and restoring ecosystems and biodiversity, mobilizing the industry for a clean and sustainable economy. This is one of the main objectives, by the way, of the Circular Economy Action Plan, of which Jasmine will be talking about in a short while. Also achieving a fair, healthy, and environmentally friendly food system. Also, that's the main objective of the Farm to Fork strategy, of which I will be speaking about in a moment. And other policy areas include making efficient use of energy and resources in the construction sector, and also accelerating the transition to sustainable and smart mobility. So now going to the Farm to Fork strategy. Takes a little while to launch. Okay, so the Farm to Fork strategy is one of the main steps to make Europe climate neutral by 2050. And Farm to Fork aims at transforming our food system into one that is fair and healthy, and it's environmentally friendly. And to achieve this, Farm to Fork sets out both regulatory and non-regulatory initiatives to support a fair transition. So Farm to Fork was launched on the 20th of May 2020, and with the goal to reduce the EU's food system environmental and climate footprint, as well as to reverse the loss of biodiversity that we are currently going through. And in this context, the Farm to Fork strategy seeks to reduce food waste and to ensure that there are sufficient and affordable supply. There is a sufficient and affordable supply of foods for all of the citizens of the European Union, but also to guarantee that farmers receive a fair price for their products and that the EU remains a competitive trader at a global scale. So Farm to Fork aims to reach 5 main targets by 2030, and the first target it wants to achieve is cutting down chemical pesticides by 50% in agriculture. Also cutting down nutrient losses and the sales of antibiotics for farm animals also by at least 50%. Reducing the use of fertilizers by at least 20% and increasing the share of agricultural land to organic production by at least 25%. And as part of the actions required to achieve these objectives, the EU is planning the revision of many policies and regulations that already exist regarding food and agriculture, but it also wants to create new rules and to improve the coordination of other rules within the European Union. Right. But we still know very little, as Tonia was saying before, about the changes that are entailed by the EU Green Deal and specifically by the Farm to Fork strategy. But it is very likely that businesses will have to change the way they produce, transport, distribute, and market food. And one of the most immediate impacts of the Farm to Fork strategy and businesses that export to Europe will come from the new Common Agricultural Policy, which will enter into force in 2023. So businesses from outside of the European Union that are exporting to the European Union will have to comply with stricter regulations regarding labeling and information. There are also other regulations that could have an impact, and this will enter into force in the long term, so between 3 and 10 years from now. For example, there is the action plan for integrated nutrient management to reduce pollution from fertilizers. And and this includes considerations of the impacts of fertilizers, not only on human health, as it's currently the case, but also their impact on the environment. And this will result very likely in more restrictions about the type and the amounts of chemical fertilizers that are allowed in agriculture. This will have consequences for the business model of enterprises that are currently producing under a conventional agriculture regime. Other possible changes include, for example, the type of genetic technologies that are allowed in plant breeding and animal breeding and cultivation as well, but also the types and materials that are used to package raw materials and especially process products that go into the EU. I will now hand over to Jasmine, who will be telling us a little bit more about the about the Circular Economy Action Plan. Jasmine, over to you. This moment. All right.
Thanks, Diana. I'm just waiting to get the ping for sharing. Okay, so Diana's told us quite a bit about the farm to fork. This Circular Economy Action Plan is an equally very large component of the EU Green Deal, although these two only make up two of many different components. But it is also very important and is like the farm to fork. It's not just one initiative, it's a set of interrelated initiatives that deal with Europe's ambition going from a linear economy, which is what we currently operate in, to a circular economy. So what is a linear economy? Sorry, Dana, if you could just go to the slide back. Right. So a linear economy, that's what we call the state of what we currently operate in now. And in this current system, we have product life cycles which go more or less in the way that this graph shows. So, products are made from natural resources, some of which are finite or can't be reproduced, like, metals or things we take from the ground. These products are used for, often for a very short amount of time, sometimes only once. A plastic spoon, we use it once, we throw it away. And the reason for that is because they're designed that way, often to be convenient for us, for consumers. And then after the products are used, they're thrown away, where they end up in a landfill or get exported to a different country to be sorted there. Sometimes the materials are recycled, but we know that that's, for most industries, that's a very, very small amount. Sometimes as little as 1% in the case, for example, of the textiles industry. So, of course, it's this kind of system that we currently operate in has a lot of negative effects, especially for the environment. There are wasted materials, all the things that we're taking and using and throwing out. We could be reusing them, but we don't. So not only is that material wasted, but we lose the value of those materials, which we could be reusing, repurposing. And of course, once we throw them out, they end up often in landfills where they pollute the environment, they degrade the environment, and they create carbon. All these impacts, which have further impacts on our society, on our health. So what the circular economy then does, next slide please, Diana, takes us to a different way of thinking about how to use natural resources, use the products that we have and move them throughout our economy. And in this kind of system, in theory, materials are used to make products which are sustainable. They're designed to be used for a long time, to be able to be recycled and reused or repurposed. Products, aren't just made to be thrown away, but they're kept in the system. So they're either recycled or redistributed or, reused in some way, or, repurposed. They're recycled. There's less waste because of this. And what does have to be thrown away is done in a way that doesn't pollute or degrade the environment, doesn't just end up in a landfill, but it's wasted in a way that doesn't do that. So in theory, the system would, of course, create a lot of positive impacts. We'd have less waste and pollution. The value of products and materials that we use would be kept in our economy for as long as possible. Because of this, there would be more innovation, more jobs, more business opportunities. And one really key concern in Europe is that it would also alleviate supply chain risks. So there would be more materials to use and less dependency, I guess, on supply chains that might not be perceived as stable in certain points or time. So essentially, the Circular Economy Action Plan has laid out a series of main areas of the supply chain that need to be targeted in order to move Europe to a circular economy. So it's a lot of different initiatives that set out over these different points of the supply chain, and they're prioritizing applying these to what they call high waste and high potential supply chains, which includes textiles, packaging, and plastics. Next slide, please, Dana. And in the short term, there are 3 proposals for regulations and directives, which means proposals for laws, for drafts that could become laws. And this has to do with different elements, including making green claims, reducing packaging, and designing sustainable products. But these won't, they were actually, the drafts for these were supposed to come out this year, but as the last time I checked, they were all currently delayed. So that means that these things won't become laws for quite a few years. And so they won't really impact the supply chain for quite a few years. However, in the short term, there is already, this move in the market to source more sustainable goods and products. So you'll know that buyers have increasing sustainability commitments and demands, including more sustainable materials in their supply chains, but also more sustainably produced goods. And in the long term, if these laws do come into place, EU buyers may need to follow rules on things like using less packaging and creating less waste, creating and designing products which last longer, are made with materials that can be recycled or reused or repurposed, which of course would have an impact upstream. Certainly EU buyers will have to follow rules on providing more information about processing and production processes in their supply chain so that they can make sort of green claims about their products. And we'll get into that in potentially further down the presentation. But for now, that's what I'll say about the Circular Economy Action Plan. And I believe I'm passing it back to Tonia.
Thank you, Jasmine, for that presentation and for sharing your information, for sharing your knowledge with us, for Diana as well. And waiting for the screen to show for our audience. Here we are. I would like to invite Hester to join us right now to give a very short response to what we've heard so far. Hester, sorry, it's going too fast. As a researcher at PBL, you are involved in a lot of practical research into the effects of the transition to a circular economy. And what could you tell us at this time?
Well, thank you, Tonia. I think that what I would like to emphasize at this stage of the webinar is the level of ambition, actually, in these strategies. Also, in terms of what I look at specifically for the Netherlands, I mean, to become a fully circular economy by 2050, it's very ambitious. I think a lot of these targets that are being set by the EU are mean that in the short term, a lot will have to change quite quickly. And for businesses trading with the EU, this could have quite far-reaching implications, actually. Even though we don't know exactly how it's going to change, I would say that we can expect a lot of things to shift in the coming years.
And do you think that is going to, will those be changes that companies can easily implement in their businesses?
Well, it depends. I mean, for instance, if you look at textiles, there is ambition to include quite a high amount of recycled content in new textiles sold on the Dutch market, for instance, which I can also expect at EU level will also become part of policy. At the moment, I believe the level of recycled content in clothing sold here is something no more than 6%, and we're talking about going up to much higher percentages. So there's also a technical challenge. There's a challenge regarding knowledge, capacity building, but also just changing your systems to meet new criteria, etc. I think it's possible, but it's going to be if we are to reach these ambitions, there's a lot of work to be done, and a lot of support needed, I think.
Okay, thank you for that. And that is a very nice segue into our first Q&A session. Hester, please don't go away. And can I invite Dania and Jasmine to join us for the first Q&A session as well? And I see a number of questions coming in, and I would like to start with a question to all of you, actually. All these new rules, policies, regulations, is the EU actually trying to make it harder for countries outside of the EU to export to the EU? Who would like to go first?
Diana? I could say something. I don't think the EU is trying to make it harder for countries that export to the EU to continue their business. Actually, I didn't mention it earlier. There's a lot to say about the EU Green Deal, and we only have this limited time. But I invite you to have a look at CBI's website with the knowledge product regarding the European Green Deal. And there it is mentioned, because it's one of the points that the EU has been emphasizing, that as part of the EGD, the European Green Deal, there will be support programs and cooperation will be emphasized to help trading partners outside of the EU make the transition. And this is already being done through the EU representations overseas that are liaising with national governments and business support organizations in other countries to make them aware and to help prepare for the European Green Deal. So as I said before, check out CBI's website, because there are quite a few tips, resources, and links that show where to look for further information, but also where you could potentially obtain help in making the transition. I don't know if Jasmine or Hester have something to add to that.
Hester, anything to add?
Well, I mean, I wouldn't say the EU is purposely making it, trying to make it more difficult. But I think that some of the ambitions that we've set within the EU to meet our climate change targets, for instance, also demand quite drastic action. So yeah, I think it's better to see it in that light, or I would see it in that light. We're facing a global biodiversity crisis, for instance. It's going to take a lot of effort to meet our targets and ambitions on a lot of these issues.
Okay, thank you for that. And we have a good number of questions coming in from our audience. And if you have questions that you would like us to answer, please ask your questions in the questions tab, and we will pick them up now or during our second Q&A. But to kick off one of the questions that we received from our audience, Alain says, the EU and Dutch government are heavily subsidizing export of chemical fertilizers and pesticides to West Africa. As a consequence, organic farming is not competitive, and our locally produced organic fertilizers and pesticides don't sell, and the export of food crops and shea butter to Europe becomes more and more problematic. Diana, could I ask you to comment on that? I think biopesticides is one of the topics that we might pick, depending on what our audience wants to hear, but could I ask you to comment on that ahead of that?
Yes, I totally agree with that observation, and very well pointed out. It is true that some of the EU's practices have been detrimental to other countries' agriculture, and I understand that the EU Green Deal is also trying to curb that. And so not only do the developments, the policy and the strategies that are part of the EU Green Deal try to improve yeah, sustainability standards for the EU or within the EU, but also overseas. So there's the expectation that there will be a spillover effect. And I think, although it's not fully, the policy has not fully finalized, the policy regarding biopesticides. The purpose is indeed to increase the use of these biopesticides and well, eventually to make it also more competitive for countries overseas to have the opportunity to produce more organic foods also, but also to export to the EU. I hope this answered your question.
And if not, Alain, please feel free to follow up with another question in the questions tab. I'm going to, we have a good number of questions, and to make sure that we don't overstep our time in the middle of the webinar, I'm going to take one more question and push the other questions to our second Q&A session. Amit is asking, is there any real-time chart or graph available on progress being made by different countries on EU Green Deal goals, and especially developing countries? I think that's a question for our market researchers. Do we have any, is progress being recorded anywhere in terms of the goals that the EU has set and how the different countries are doing in terms of realizing those goals?
Not that I'm aware. What I know, though, that every country, apart from the legislation that applies at EU level, there are also countries have the duty to elaborate their own national plans based on a baseline set by the EU Green Deal. Yeah, I'm not aware that there's at the moment any mechanism or any system in place to trace this progress. There should be. I'm just not aware of how or when. Maybe Hester have a better idea.
Jazz or Hester, any of you aware of any tracking or monitoring that's going on?
I personally, oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Jasmine.
Thanks, Hester. I was just going to reiterate what Diana said. I mean, I have not seen anything like that. I would just clarify that, you know, when I read this country, I hear maybe that the asker of the question wants to see progress being made all over the world on the EU Green Deal, but of course the EU Green Deal is a policy made for EU countries. So if you're referring to progress being made by different EU countries, perhaps one day that will be the case that we can see, you know, the way that legislation's being implemented in different places. But of course, you wouldn't see that for all the countries in the world, because there would be no sort of.
That information is not available for all
right.
countries. Yeah. Now the Dutch are very good at tracking and monitoring progress. Hester, is the NEAA, Netherlands Environment Assessment Agency, perhaps tracking such progress in the EU or elsewhere in the world?
Well, thank you for the compliment. PBL monitors the transition to a circular economy in the Netherlands, and we do keep track of policy progress as well in the EU, but not in a systematic way, such as I think what our audience member intends. It's actually quite difficult even to track progress on these kinds of policies, even in one country. We're struggling quite a bit as well to monitor and track our transition to a circular economy, how to measure it, etc. So yeah, it would be really nice, but I think it's quite a challenge.
Okay, that's definitely something we're going to be looking forward to then, I guess. Thank you, panel, for your participation. I'm going to ask our audience to fill out a second poll that we have, and from there we're going to move into a presentation by Jasmine, who's going to be telling us a bit more about what the impact on exports to the EU is going to be. One poll coming up. And please do fill it out. Which one do you think is going to have the most impact on your business? Okay. See that providing more information about production and supply chain is one of the elements that is seen by our audience so far as an issue of serious concern, and also reducing the use of fertilizers and pesticides. I'll keep it open for a little longer to allow everyone to vote. We've had about 55% of our audience voting so far. Okay, I am going to leave it open for just a few more seconds. Thank you for voting. And this is what we see. So as you can see, our audience expects that having to provide more information about production and supply chain is an issue that is of most concern to them, followed by reducing the use of fertilizers and pesticides. And again, thank you for voting. And we still have our panel, part of our panel online. Jasmine, before we move to how imports to the EU are going to be impacted, let me just ask you and Hester, are you surprised by what you see here? Hester?
Well, yes and no. I suppose it also really depends on what your product is. Yeah, I think it's nice to see that less waste and less packaging material are not such large areas of concern, or the use of antibiotics. I think that the fifth option about disclosure, providing information about production and supply chain, that is a little worrying, but also something that I think some support and sharing of information, etc., can also make easier, hopefully, for exporters to the EU. So it's something that can be addressed if that is an area of concern.
Okay, and Dania, Jasmine is going to give a presentation. So let me ask you, are you surprised by what you see here?
No, to be honest.
Oh, sorry.
Dania, then we move to Jasmine, and Jasmine can just segue into her presentation.
No, I'm not surprised at all about how, like, the results of the poll. I think it is at least the takeaway I get from, like, reading into the policies of the European Green Deal is that indeed the EU will like to keep tabs on how goods are produced and the impacts of the production processes and the supply chains on not only on the environment but also on human rights and different issues that are of concern. So yeah, I'm not at all surprised.
Okay, and then I would like to thank Hester and Dania for participating in our Q&A and responding to the poll. And Jasmine, I'm going to ask you to respond to the poll as well, but also ask you to then directly segue into your presentation about impacts on exports to the EU.
Sure, thanks, Tonia. No, like my colleagues, I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised at all to see that there's concern around having to provide more information about supply chain practices, often even more information than you feel like you're already providing to your buyers. I used to work with companies downstream on their sourcing programs, so I know that the feedback that my clients often got from their suppliers was, we fill out so many questionnaires. There's so many different areas that we need to, areas of information that we need to keep up with, and so I understand that it's already complicated, and to see that might become even more complicated or even more of a burden, I can understand that would be of concern. And hopefully maybe today we can clarify a bit what the EU Green Deal, what aspects of the EU Green Deal might actually come up in the future. So how are imports to the EU impacted? Well, I'm going to give just sort of 4 high-level ways that, in theory, if the EU Green Deal laws, especially the ones that we've talked about today from the Farm to Fork and the Circular Economy Action Plan, if these go through in the next few years, what does that actually mean upstream? What does that mean for you, and what would your buyers have to start implementing? And overall, what kind of impacts would you see? So, I mean, one, it might sound obvious, but there would overall be higher standards for social and environmental sustainability. There are not a lot, but there are some of the laws which are being proposed currently, which mean that exporters to the EU will have to comply with higher standards generally. This includes, as Diana mentioned, a potential ban on certain pesticides, new labeling requirements for organic products, less packaging in products, less packaging waste, even requirements for products which are designed to last longer and be reused or recycled, all of which will have, of course, impacts upstream in the way that you produce and process your products, and even package your products. Of course, as I mentioned earlier as well, whether or not the laws change, companies have been making commitments. So some of you will already be, have felt that sort of market change and that market shift from your buyers asking for certain materials or for certain certified goods, or certain types of information about your product so that they can make claims up downstream. You'll know that a lot of companies have made commitments, of course, to sourcing sustainable products and materials that have been made in a way that respect the environment and human rights. So already there is an increased demand, and already you'll have already encountered that exporting to Europe. What the EU Green Deal would do would make that equal for all buyers. So all buyers would have to comply in some way with higher standards. What those higher standards would be, how they would be implemented, that of course is still very much on the table and is still being discussed and drafted, actually. But what you can expect if those kinds of laws do go through is just a higher demand, and of course more information about how your product is made or processed. Yeah, and so standards exist already for many types of commodities, and many products can be certified sustainable under different schemes, even under different kind of corporate initiatives. In theory, your certifications would make your product more attractive on the market and bring premium prices to you and other producers upstream. Though, of course, we know in practice that doesn't work that way. My point here really is that you know what higher standards will mean for your product, and so what you can expect is that might be extended for a lot more of your buyers. Instead of just a few buyers asking for certain origins or certain characteristics, a lot more of your buyers would have to comply by certain standards for you to be able to export to them to the EU. So the second big impact, and again, this is clearly something that you're all very interested in, very concerned about, is just generally increased demand for information on production and processing practices. And this comes from a few different places in the Green Deal and actually other laws being passed in the EU, including on due diligence. But essentially, what you can expect is that there will be more requests about not only where the product comes from, where the materials come from, but how it was processed or produced, what went into it in terms of environmental practices, in terms of respect for human rights. Again, this is something that you will have been exposed to, that you will know if you're exporting to Europe as a basic step in being more responsible, more sustainable. Companies will often ask for information about how product is made, where it comes from, what practices are in place in your company and in your suppliers' companies to ensure that sustainability and human rights are being considered and respected. In theory, this information is used to improve practices all along the supply chain, but also to communicate to consumers, especially downstream, that the product is, sustainable, has been produced in a way that that they agree with. But of course, currently only some buyers do this. Often it's the larger companies, although that depends on the sectors. But the main point is that they all do it in different ways now. So you'll notice that your buyers, all different buyers, will often ask for information in different ways. So new laws that are being proposed currently to make this kind of due diligence or information gathering or substantiating green claims for companies in the EU. If the EU is going to make that mandatory for all companies, it will mean that you need to provide potentially more information, or that more buyers will be asking for that information. But it would also mean that they'd have to streamline that process. So it could mean that in the future, as Hester said actually, that there would be mechanisms and tools that would be developed to make it actually easier for you to provide that information, because of course I think there will be a recognition that it's quite a heavy burden to have to do that for however many buyers that you're having to export to. So again, there isn't a lot yet on the details of what these mechanisms will entail, because the drafts haven't been published yet, at least on the circular economy side. And perhaps Hester again can explain a bit more later if there's any examples from the Dutch government that indicate what it might look like. But again, in the short term, it might mean that there's there's more demand for this information, but in the long term, it could actually streamline the process and make it a bit easier for you. But what it means now is that putting in place systems for collecting this kind of information, understanding what is required in terms of traceability for your product, for your commodity, would likely be a good idea, and to understand what's being expected of you in terms of these sort of higher standards. And then in terms of looking at the shorter to long term, again, quite high level impacts. We've already discussed that in the short term, you might be faced with increased demand, potentially slightly chaotic, demands for information from different sides, from your buyers. It might not be very clear for a while, for a few years, what exactly it is that the buyers need from you. The buyers are also struggling with that. However, in the long term, the EU is not the only market that will be facing these kinds of legislations. The US also has already certain legislations in place in terms of child labor for certain commodities, things like that. They're also debating a Green Deal. In the UK as well, similar initiatives happening. So in the long term, in theory, it will mean that if you start planning for the impacts of the EU Green Deal, you'll be better prepared for a global market for your sustainably produced goods. And I think I'll leave it there, Tonia.
Yes, thank you, Jasmine. I'm going to launch a new poll. So for our audience, we are now at the stage where we would give you some more information. You had the perfect slide, actually, Jasmine.
Sorry.
We're now at the stage where we would like to give you some more information about the various policies, and just not really do a deep dive, because we don't actually have the time to do that really deep dive, but give you some more information about a number of policies. And we don't actually know which ones are of the most interest to you. So I'm going to launch a poll and ask you to tell us, and I'm actually looking for the poll. We're going to launch a third poll and ask you to tell us which of the policies you'd like to know more about. So please fill it out now. Yes, you have it on your screens. Okay. I'm going to leave it open for just a little longer. Just over half of our audience has voted so far. And just as a reminder to our audience, if you have any questions that you would like us to answer at the end of this webinar, we have a second Q&A session for which we also have more time. So if you have questions, please feel free to ask them in the questions tab, and we will do our best to answer all the questions that come in. Okay. Last 10 seconds. If you haven't voted, please vote now, because that is going to determine which policy you're going to hear more about in the rest of the webinar. Okay. 5 more seconds. Thank you. I'm seeing some last minute voters. Okay, I'll give you a few more seconds. And it's a tie between 2 topics, as I'm seeing so far. There's one topic that is of really big interest, and there are 2 topics that are very interesting, 2 other topics that are very interesting to our audience. Thank you for voting. I'm closing the poll now and sharing the results. So as you can see, substantiating the green claims is one of the biggest things, it's actually the biggest topic that our audience wants to know about. And sustainable corporate governance and new organics legislation are 2 other topics that are almost tied for position. To the last person who voted, I think you made a difference there. I think I'm going to ask Jasmine and Diana if they could give, instead of just talking about the top 2, if they would be so kind as to talk about the 3. So substantiating the green claims, sustainable corporate governance, and new organics legislation. Obviously, that means you might have to cut it a little short because we planned for just 2 topics during this webinar. But if you could fit in a third, that would be perfect. Substantiating green claims, Jasmine, that is you. So I'm going to ask you to take over presentation for me again and tell us.
Sure, thanks, Tonia.
While I close the poll, there you go.
Sorry, Tonia, am I waiting for you to ping me the presentation or mode? Okay, I guess I'll just go ahead. So there was a little slide for this. But essentially, the proposal for a regulation on substantiating green claims, oh yes, thank you, Tonia, refers to a potential law in the EU that would require buyers to have a lot more information to be able to claim that their product is green. So all of this is in quotation marks because, of course, you know, saying something is sustainable or green depends a lot on the product, where it comes from, etc. So there's, again, a lot up in the air with that. However, the specific objectives around this law would be to propose essentially creating a standard for providing reliable environmental information for EU buyers. Again, all of this is about the your EU buyers and EU companies having the responsibility to prove that if they're saying that their product is sustainable, they actually have to prove that their product is sustainable to their consumers. So they have to follow a set of regulations about information that they have to provide, that they have to collect and provide be able to back up, that their product is organic, or their product is organic is a bad example because they're already, there's already a standard to back that up, but to say that their product is actually green. So a few things that are, that would be proposed under this regulation would be to create a standard to provide reliable environmental information, and also to reduce and simplify the administrative burden of collecting this information. So there is a recognition that it's a lot to do to collect all this information, especially when you have hundreds of suppliers for one commodity. And I think that reduction and simplification of that burden would be felt upstream as well. So that's a slightly good piece of news. Like I said, this proposal has not come out yet. It was planned to come out this year, actually a lot earlier this year, but last I checked, it wasn't out yet. There will be a public feedback process on the proposal, like with all stages of EU legislation. And after the proposal comes out, there will be a feedback process, and then a new draft will come out, and that will have to be reviewed and approved by the Parliament and the Council to become law. So there's still quite a bit of time to go before anything happens. But what you can expect from the draft is that they'll either propose, nothing changes at all, there's no need for substantiating green claims, or they will propose a voluntary system where companies choose to make, standardized green claims, like proven green claims, using existing methods like certification or whatnot, and that will strengthen the green claims that they already have compared to other green claims that are not substantiated. Or a third option that they've said that they would think about is a mandatory EU-wide legal framework requiring companies to make green claims a certain way, in a way that can be standardized and verified. So that's kind of the three options that they're looking at. And they have also, the Commission has also claimed that any proposed regulation will consider World Trade Rules on fair competition, meaning that in theory, any tools that come out of this, any mechanisms for substantiating the green claims would result in no less favorable treatment of imported products compared with EU-produced goods. Now, again, we don't know how they will ensure that exactly, but it has specifically been mentioned in the roadmap, which is a document that the EU comes out in that they prepare to tell you a bit about the proposal before they actually publish the proposal. So that's what I can say about substantiating green claims. I hope it's been informative, and I'll let Diana take over to present us on the rest.
Thank you, Jasmine. And Diana, shall I move your slides for you, or should I make you translate? Okay. So
well, if you don't mind sharing your going over what was the largest one, sustainable corporate governance, right?
This one, sustainable corporate governance, and the third one is the new organics legislation.
All right, so let's go to the sustainable corporate governance. What I can tell you about this is that this is an initiative that aims to improve the EU regulations on corporate governance, as the name says. So it aims to help companies to improve the sustainability-related matters in their own operations and in their value chains with regards to social, human rights, climate change, the environment, gender, and so on. But as with other things, Green Deal, there's very little published about this regulation, although the adoption of this regulation was planned for the first half of 2021. But we can expect that it might lead to far-reaching legal reforms for all companies in the EU, which will have an effect on their suppliers in other countries outside of the EU. So specifically, it could be that the European Commission will introduce a duty of care that will require businesses to consider, again, the environmental, human rights, and social impacts of their activities, and to integrate these considerations into the company's strategy and decision making. But it could also be that companies could be required to actively trace the conditions under which their processes further up in the supply chain are taking place. So this would mean that for SMEs that are exporting to the EU, they will have stricter traceability mechanisms. yeah, that was it, the sustainable corporate governance in a nutshell. And then we had also the new organics legislation, right? If yeah, if you could move over to that slide, thank you. So on the 1st of January 2022, that's very soon, the new regulation on organic production and labeling of organic products, also called the new organics legislation, will enter into force. And the goal of this new organics legislation is to strengthen the control system, helping to build consumer confidence in the EU organic system. So the EU regulations on organic farming are generally designed to provide a very clear structure for the production of organic foods or organic goods across the whole European Union. And this is again to satisfy consumer demand for and also to build the trust of consumers on organic products, but also to provide a fair marketplace for producers and distributors and marketeers. And this impacts also imported organic food because, well, these regulations also apply to any food that is entering the European Union. These imports are subject to control procedures to guarantee that it has been produced and shipped in accordance to with these organic principles. So from this perspective, there will be some changes that will come about for the new organics legislation, and I can already tell you that the first and perhaps one of the first impacts that will be felt is that the rules on labeling in new organics regulation will not only cover the label that you see in the product, but it will apply to any statement, indication, any trademark, any trade names, any pictures or any signs that concern a product, that are used in advertising a product, and that are visible on packaging or documents or labels or signs or rings or bands or whatever, anything that is that any brand that is accompanying or referring to that product. So in this context, using terms such as organic or ecological to refer to foods or products, calling them like bio or eco, will only be allowed if the product is certified organic. You can no longer, a little bit like the green claims, I guess, along that line, you can no longer call something ecological or from ecological agriculture or biological product unless it is certified organic or biological or certified ecological. So also the producers of these agricultural products have to observe that the product packaging design is not too similar to the colors, green and white, and the shape, the leaf of the EU organic logo, the EU bio logo, because this could mislead consumers into believing that a product is organic. Currently, that's already the case, that some products are, for some products, marketing strategies make use of I don't know, imagery that suggests that these products are produced under natural processes or other processes that are more respectful of the environment. So that's not longer going to be allowed. You can only use that kind of imagery if your product is certified organic, as I said before. Also, the labels of organic products that will be entering the EU will have to include the code number of the control body to which the producer is subject at the place where the product was made. So, for example, it will have to state on the label whether this was produced in the EU or outside of the EU, and whether the products or the materials that went into making this product are produced in partially or entirely in other countries. Yeah, that's basically it for the new organics legislation. So I don't know if we have any more time for other.
Unfortunately, we don't have enough time to go through all the points, but thankfully we have the study on the CBI website, and our audience will be able to do some in-depth reading there. Diana and Jasmine, thank you. I would like to invite Hester to switch on her camera and join us as she gives us a personal perspective. There you are, Hester. I thought you hadn't come online yet. as she, gives us a personal perspective about insights for business. And Hester, I'm going to be moving your slides. So are you ready for me to move to the next slide?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Tonia. Yes, I was asked to reflect on today's presentations from my experience as a researcher focusing on the effects of the Dutch transition to circular economy. And I think what stands out most for me in today's session is the question surrounding transparency, monitoring, reporting, accountability. I think that for businesses trading with the EU, many things are still very uncertain. However, I think that it is safe to say that there is a general increasing demand for transparency and accountability by stakeholders in the EU, but also in producer countries. Many of you will have experience with this already, as was also reflected in the poll results, that increasing demand for reporting is also a concern. Well, more and more governments, social, environmental organizations want to know what is going on throughout supply chains outside the EU. So this puts increasing pressure on businesses to provide this information. And this in turn means that buyers and their investors and financiers will also ask for more information about business activities, employees, environmental impacts, social impacts, other risks that may have to do with your business. Well, for the time being, most mandatory reporting regulation in the EU will first target larger businesses, such as the, you may be familiar with the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive. It increases the existing reporting requirements of the EU's non-financial reporting directive. However, for smaller businesses trading with EU partners, you can also anticipate more frequent requests by your business partners or financial institutions that you have that finance your business to disclose information about business operation and impact as well, if you are part of larger supply chains. And also, I think that it is uncertain, but in the future we can expect that regulation will be expanded to include SMEs also exporting to the EU more and more. In the meantime, however, I think it's good to emphasize that voluntary disclosure by SMEs can contribute also to increased comparability between business and may give you a comparative advantage. For example, if potential business partners or investors are implementing their sustainability requirements, it makes it easier for them to assess the sustainability risks in your business operations if the information is readily available. This also means that implementing monitoring and reporting systems can make your company more attractive for business partners or even financial partners. In addition, research also shows that awareness and monitoring of sustainability risks can have benefits for your company internally, and it can help your company navigate future challenges that you may face. So what is it that this actually boils down to in a very general sense? Well, monitoring basically just refers to keeping track of the sustainability risks and impacts on people and the environment that are related to your business. So there are several issues that may be relevant for your specific products. It will be different for someone working with textiles, for instance, than for agricultural products, but there is also overlap, of course. For example, you may be exposed to risks concerning the use of scarce resources, such as water in dry areas, or you may be exposed to challenging community relations near your business operations, or challenges concerning workers involved in your business. Monitoring these issues can take many forms, and it can also follow very specific standards. When it comes to reporting, this basically refers to disclosing your sustainability policies, so your ambitions and your commitments, and also reporting on the progress that you're making on implementing them. So it can follow different standards, and usually mandatory reporting will dictate clearly how to disclose information. However, in most cases, it's safe to say that it's important to show your awareness and your awareness of potential sustainability risks that your business may contribute to, and also importantly, what you aim to do about it. So what measures you're taking to prevent problems from materializing, and also to decrease the risk. So setting sustainability policies is very important in this regard. For example, you can make public commitments to prevent pollution in your operations, or to prevent child labor, or you can commit to achieving a specific targets by year X, so to speak. Finally, then it's important to report publicly also on the progress you've made to address these risks and challenges that you have identified. For example, you can report on how your business or your organization has tried, what measures you've taken to decrease pollution or the use of scarce resources, and what next steps you plan to take to meet your goals. I think that, yeah, as I said at the start, I think it's not clear yet how this increasing push for transparency from the EU and from different stakeholders will really translate into mandatory requirements for exporters to the EU. But I think it's safe to say that if anything does become, it's my opinion that if you can expect anything to really become mandatory, then it will involve transparency, it will involve monitoring and reporting on sustainability issues. And this is a very challenging issue for many producers. But if there's one thing that I could choose to put emphasis on and say invest in this, then it would be on increasing transparency in your business operations. Thank you, Tonia. I don't know if, yeah, hi.
Hi, thank you, Hester, and please stay online. Can I invite Jasmine, Diana, and Arthur to join us on the panel right now as we go to our second Q&A session? And just waiting for Arthur to join us. And Hester, you've said a lot about the no regret strategies, and we have a good number of questions coming in that have to do with the consequences of the EGD for companies, particularly those companies in developing countries. So Alain, for example, followed up with a question saying, the new EU requirements, a lot of small cooperatives, and I'm going to focus on two questions that relate to this because they're very representative of the questions that we're seeing coming in. So Alain says that small-scale cooperatives and small-scale farmers are going to find it very challenging to actually meet the requirements as set out in the EGD. And the risk is that since they cannot meet these requirements, that middlemen end up, who are able to meet the requirements, who have the funding, end up having much more control over these small-scale farmers, small cooperatives, etc. And there is also a question that ties into that, and that's the question that was asked by Eric. He says, as far as I know, the EU delegation in third countries don't apply a clear program directed at preparing local companies, cooperatives, etc. for the EGD. What's the expectation here? And I'm just going to, as I said, these questions are representative for a number of questions that we see coming in. So I'm just going to ask the panel to respond. And Arta, maybe I can start with you because CBI is focused on supporting imports from developing countries. What do you think?
Yeah, I can shortly and generally answer you perhaps about it. But the first thing was about the importance of gender. And that's something, over the last 50 years, and particularly the last couple of years, it's more and more important in the general strategy of CBI. In particular, since the last strategy that we've been working with for the last half a year, gender is one of the spear points, so to say, CBI. It's a cross-cutting theme in all our efforts. CBI has made the commitment as what we call to be gender aware. So that means in our projects, current and future projects, we are working hard towards creating decent jobs for women. Working towards things like female economic empowerment, improving the economic climate for women. That's all in our mission. For people that are interested to read and learn more about that, it's also on our CBI website. You can find a strategy document to read more about that. So I hope that kind of answers the first part of your question.
I think, and maybe you'd like to add to that in a second, Arthur, but I think one of the things that we are very much aware of, and when I say we, I refer to CBI, the market researchers, as well as Hester at PBL, the Environmental Assessment Agency. One of the things that we are very much aware of is that these requirements that are set out by the EU are going to have a very, very significant impact on producers, small-scale farmers, particularly female producers and small-scale farmers in developing countries. But at the same time, right now, so much is still uncertain that we cannot really say what is the support going to look like? How are these requirements going to play out in practice? We know that the impact is going to be huge, but do we know anything about maybe EU support programs for these kinds of companies, national government support programs? Do we have any ideas about what's in the works, what's being planned? Hester, Diana, Arthur, anyone?
Yeah, I would say shortly. So we're really at the beginning. So as you can also read in the study, which I will show you the link to at the end of this presentation, is that just recently most of the EU policies have been announced only this year, will become policy over the coming years. So that is I think that's the most crucial message, that you can be a latecomer and react when the market really demands it from you, or you can already take in the knowledge, and if it fits your business model, already take steps and be ahead of the curve, and that way you can become more competitive and do more exports, so to say.
Hester?
Well, I mean, I would like to echo what Arthur has said. I think this is quite a difficult question to answer, honestly. But I think there are many different organizations and parties working on this issue at the same time, and there's a lot of stuff developing at the moment. A lot of internal discussion as well between businesses, government, civil society on how is this all going to pan out. The ambitions are very big. We can all see that. So I think it is vital that these support, the support or capacity building also gets a lot of attention. But yeah, as Arthur said, we're at the beginning of many of these ambitions, really, and it also remains to be seen how it will translate into actual regulations. But I don't know about all kinds of things that are happening, but I would say that there is a lot of movement on this topic, and I expect to see more and more information becoming public about support.
Yeah, and I believe that there is a plan. I'm not sure how far that plan has been developed, but I do believe that there is a plan that the EU representatives in developing countries are going to be able to share information about the support that the EU will be providing for cooperatives, businesses, exporters in developing countries. But again, as I said, we're very much at the beginning of this whole EGD, and the consequences are becoming clear. So there's a lot of work going on behind the scenes, but unfortunately, we don't have any clear answers for you right now. Jasmine and Diana, do you have anything to add to that? Maybe also in terms of what kind of support, do you know of any support that the EU is providing to green startups in Europe, for example, those that may or may not be collaborating with exporters in developing countries?
Right. So as I said before, one of the issues that the European Commission has been stressing as part of its announcements and its launching of the European Green Deal has been its commitment to support both enterprises in Europe but also overseas to make the transition. For SMEs, for example, overseas, this support let's say the European Green Deal is going to be embedded in the European Union's overseas aid programs. How exactly that's going to be, again, still not very clear. But also nationally or at the EU level, again, every country is supposed to make its national programs. And in this context, at least I can speak for what I know in the Netherlands, there is, many of you might know, RVO, which is the Netherlands enterprise agency, and they do have quite a few business support programs for Netherlands-based enterprises, and I wouldn't be surprised that other EU countries also have this kind of programs. And then, well, for overseas, we have, for example, CBI that, as you know, supports small and medium enterprises. And as I think some of our someone in the audience mentioned that it is very hard for small and medium enterprises to cope with any change, and that is very true. And that's the reason, Arthur, correct me if I'm wrong, that CBI exists. It is to help acknowledging that it is harder for SMEs to cope with changes, to adapt to new changes because they might lack the capital or because they might lack the capacities to cope with this. That's why agencies like CBI exist. So what they do, again, I might be stealing the floor from you, Arthur, is to, and I might be repeating something many of you already know, but it's to link SMEs with buyers in the EU. And I think in this, here it's very important to highlight the role of buyers in the EU, which could, by many accounts, be considered as front runners. So they are the ones that are usually adapting to these changes faster. So I think it is very important to link SMEs overseas with these buyers in the EU so that they can help them make the transition as well. Yeah, that's what I have to say.
Okay, thank you. And just to tie into that, we have a question in our audience, from our audience, about if we do actually want to take drastic action, it's going to lead to higher costs. One of the things that we see in Europe is that many consumers say that, yes, sustainability is very important, organic food is very important, but not all consumers are actually willing to pay more for those products that are sustainable, organic, or recyclable, or produced in a circular fashion. So do you think that the EU is also going to take action to educate consumers, not just about the fact that smallholders and producers and exporters in developing countries are going to have to face up to higher requirements, but that those higher requirements also mean that what gets exported and sold in the EU has a higher cost for consumers? Who would like to take that? Jasmine, come on.
Well, we didn't, it's an excellent question, and we do mention it briefly in our final in the final report in the briefing that you can see online, that, you know, we did acknowledge that there will be, of course, cost to the transition. There's no one's denying that. The question of who will bear those costs, you know, whether it will be borne specifically in the supply chain, whether governments will be subsidizing this, you know, will the EU have like enormous programs to support the transition? again, we don't know. Yeah, I mean, I think
we're going to have to wait and see basically how it pans out.
Yeah,
I think,
yeah. No, sorry, go ahead, Arthur.
Arthur and then Hester.
Yeah, very shortly about the topic educating consumers. So I've read the study, I've read a couple of other sources, and I haven't read anything about that particular topic yet, but what you do see in general is that consumers educate themselves. So whenever you study, and it doesn't really matter in which particular sector, whether it's agriculture or consumer products or industrial product, well, industrial maybe less, but any products that are bought by consumers, you see that yeah, consumers are asking for more sustainable products, whether it's in clean labels, whether it's in products that become more competitive because consumers read the sustainability claims. So that's just a general tendency. So I would like, yeah, put the question back and think, could be, at least I don't have an answer on that, but probably the end result is the same. So consumers are demanding more sustainable products.
Clearly, Arthur, you are an optimist. Hester, what do you think?
Well, I'd like to shift the question a little bit. I think that, you know, when you go to the supermarket and you have to choose between the often more expensive organic or sustainably produced product or the cheaper option, which does not make the same claims or can't meet the same standards, that is a very difficult choice for many consumers who are just living their day-to-day lives. And I think what is key here, and what is also very important for the whole transition to circularity, but also a climate neutral economy, what is really necessary is also true price. So this means that you actually pay more if you pollute more. So if you're buying something that is more harmful to the environment or for people, where the costs are actually artificially low, because basically we're not paying for the damage we're doing, then you know, sustainably produced products also become more attractive, because you're paying the real price. You're paying for the environmental damage. You're paying for the social externalities of the product. And I think, yeah, the pricing that reflects all of the costs in the supply chain is necessary, and something that we can make a lot of progress on also in the EU.
Okay, and I think that nicely ties into some of the other questions that we have seen come in. We have a question from Ahmed, for example, who says, how important is using renewable energy for sustainability? And another question that we have is, will decent payments, like living wages, for example, to producers in developing countries be part of the green and sustainability claims? And I think that nicely ties into what you were saying about true price, Hester, but I'm not sure if this is a question you want to jump into or whether it's more for Jasmine and Diana. Jasmine?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it sounds just like a technical question about the green claims policy that will come out. The answer is no. The decent payments, things around living wages will not be part of the green claims policy, because the green claims policy deals specifically with environmental issues or environmental claims around a product. There are, however, a few other legislations being proposed that will look at human rights issues. So Diana mentioned the sustainable corporate governance policy. I don't know if that would cover it specifically, but potentially more impactful might be the environmental and human rights due diligence, which the proposal has actually come out and been drafted. I don't know if it's been adopted, but the that is essentially saying that EU buyers have to do a certain amount of due diligence on the products that they create, the materials that they use in their products, including on human rights. So again, there's enormous amounts of details on that, and living wage is definitely not specified in the proposal itself, but it may come out in the process of rolling out and implementing the actual legislation, because of course it's something that companies think about a lot, especially in the context of agricultural goods and textiles.
Yeah, absolutely. And Diana, renewable energy and sustainability?
Yeah, I just wanted to add to what Jasmine just said, that living wages are labor rights, and labor rights are human rights. So although it's not been specifically outlined, it is. I can imagine that that it will have to be included in the human rights due diligence legislation or the sustainable corporate governance legislation.
And does that also apply to renewable energy, for example?
Yeah.
Will buyers be looking at whether producers and exporters are using renewable energy, for example, to produce their goods in their production processes, maybe?
I'm not sure it specifically targets energy, like the kind of energy that it's used in industrial processes. It generally the law says that more sustainable or higher sustainability standards, including environmental standards, will be applied. But there are other strategies and other pieces of legislation that we didn't speak about, but that are part of the European Green Deal. And one of them is the carbon border adjustment mechanism that we didn't mention here. But if you log on to CBI's website and look at the market research on the European Green Deal, there's a short explanation on that, and it does cover energy. So it basically, in a very quickly said, it's a carbon tax on imports into the EU, and that includes the kind of energy that goes into industrial processes.
Okay, thank you for that. And when it comes to exporting, we've seen that there's going to be a need for more transparency. We see that the requirements are increasing. Certifications, are they actually compulsory, or can a company get away, or is it acceptable for a company to just disclose their sustainability processes and policy, or do they actually need the certification?
No, well, certification won't be mandatory. Certainly, any agricultural product that is imported to the EU will be held again to higher sustainability standards, including as part of the farm to fork strategy, using 50% less chemical fertilizers and pesticides. So anyway, regardless of whether you're certified or not, or whether you're producing certified organic or not, you will have to comply with this if you want to export into the EU. And then certainly, and I think we mentioned that earlier, that organic certification is in a way a competitive advantage for exporters. But also organically certified, organically produced is also going to be held to higher standards, and this relates to the new organics legislation again. That with respect to labeling, that no one will be allowed anymore to make any reference to natural or biological or organic or whatever unless it is certified. Indeed, I hope that answered the question.
Yes, I think it does, and if not, I'll ask our audience member to please follow up on that question. I'm seeing a question here from Stephanie about sustainable packaging. She says, can you explain a bit more about sustainable packaging? I think, Stephanie, you mean examples of sustainable packaging. Diana, Jasmine, any examples that you could share?
I can take this on. So examples of sustainable packaging under what is being considered by the EU is just less packaging generally. So using finding ways to use less heavy packaging, less material for the packaging, and then different kinds of packaging which can be recycled or reused or repurposed in some way. Again, we're waiting on the details of the proposed policy, but they are emphasizing reducing the packaging amounts and changing the types of packaging materials to make them more sustainable.
Okay, thank you. And packaging ties in very nicely to a next question about transportation from Angela. Angela says, the Green Deal might actually generate a reduction in exports from distant third countries, distant from the EU, that is, based on the fact that long-distance transport is considered highly polluting, and in bidding processes, proximity criteria have already been included in the selection process. So how can distant third countries, again, distant from the EU, start to prepare to remain competitive under the new restrictions? I think that's a very good question, actually. Are we going to see a shortening of global supply chains? Don't know, jump in at the same time. Who'd like to take this question?
Yeah, I think just out of the box, because it's relative. Distance is relative, so it's just speculation, but it could be if you have, let's say, an agricultural product that is coming from South America, and maybe Africa is still long distance, but it's closer. It could mean increased opportunities for producers of the same agricultural products from Africa. That could be if you would include CO2 in the as a requirement. It could be a benefit. I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I think, did I say it was Angela who asked this question? The person who asked the question, Angela, indeed, said that one of the things that she's seeing is that proximity criteria are already being included in the bidding processes, and obviously being given weight as well to determine which producer or which exporter is actually ends up being selected. So is there anything that you think that companies in developing countries, especially very distant countries, maybe in Asia or in the southern part of South America, could start to do to help them to be competitive and remain competitive? Hester, maybe you would like to try answering this?
Well, I mean, this is speculation on my part then, but I would assume that then you need to compete on other things. I mean, you can't really do anything about the fact that you're far away from the market physically, but yeah, I think that it won't be the only criteria. I mean, there's also lots of products that we can't get closer to home, and I think if you can stand out because you do something else that exporters closer to the EU don't do or don't do as well, perhaps that can also help shift the balance. But as I said, I'm not a market expert, so this is just my opinion.
Okay, so basically what you're saying is that as a company in a very distant country, you should not focus on the distance, but rather focus on things that can distinguish you as a unique selling proposition, perhaps in the market. I think we've seen some products from Peru, and I'm not sure if it's India or Vietnam, that have become so highly sought after and so highly demanded in the market that it doesn't actually matter where they are located. Consumers want those products, so people keep buying them despite the fact that they are very far away. Let's see, we have a few more questions and we have already exceeded our time by 15 minutes. We still have a lot of attendees present, so I'm going to pick up a couple of questions. Diana, this one's for you. We have a genuine leather bags producer who says, what things do I need to consider improving in order to get my products to the EU? Is that a question that you feel comfortable taking on?
Yeah, I think one of the, well, this could concern both the farm to fork strategy legislation that would be applying, but also the circular economy, and maybe Jess can jump in right after me. What I can say, for example, that would be relevant if you're a leather producer is, or what would be applying to you, is certainly the legislation on animal farming, because obviously leather comes from the hide of animals. So using fewer pesticides, antibiotics, and so on in these animals. Yeah, that's what I think of in terms of the farm to fork strategy and how this could affect your business. Maybe Jasmine has more to add on that.
Jasmine?
This is actually a very interesting question in terms of scope, because like Dania said, leather obviously comes from an animal, but you know, it's an animal product. It's not the animal itself that's being commoditized. In terms of how it would fit into the circular economy, I mean, potentially under the strategy for textiles, though I don't think it comes under the scope of a textile. Perhaps Hester can comment after. Maybe under the sustainable product policy as well, which will be focusing a lot on the again the textiles industry, which it may come under or not, which has to do with designing, you know, incorporating sustainability principles and circular principles within the design of the actual product. You know, maybe there will be increasing demands around, you know, how to recycle the product or the way it's made so that the different pieces can be used again. I honestly, I don't know. I think that, again, we're basically speculating. But I will say that outside of what we've talked about today, there's a regulation on deforestation, which will compound existing regulation on deforestation risk products, of which beef is, of course, a big one. So depending on where you source your leather, if it's coming from Brazil, for example, you will definitely want to inform yourself about the deforestation policy and how that might impact your supply chain. I don't know if Hester has anything to add from the circular side.
Yeah, I can say two things briefly. I think for leather, apart from, you know, animal welfare, etc., the use of hazardous chemicals or materials or toxic substances is also very important. I think if you have the opportunity to move into more, let's say, safer chemicals to use on your products to treat the leather, I think that would be an opportunity, because this is something that at least in the Netherlands, we are really considering a lot, the hazardous substances in products. And the other thing is recyclability. So you already see quite a lot of brands using older leather to make newer products. This fits the bill for the transition to circularity as well, to reuse materials, in your designs, but also incorporating other recycled materials, for instance, or reused materials. These are the things just off the top of my head that I can think of.
Okay, thank you for that. And we've seen a number of comments come in response to the answers that our panel has given in the past few minutes. So I'm just going to highlight a few of the comments. Regarding the distance, there is a suggestion from Sana to say that, okay, one of the things that a producer who is in a very distant country could consider is to shift from air freight to sea freight and choose cleaner ways of transportation. And I do believe that in Sweden and in a couple of other countries, they are working on developing freight ships that run on wind energy and other sustainable forms of energy. So that might be something to look into. There's a comment also from a follow-up comment, a second comment that we have here regarding true price, saying that yes, what the panel says is true, but at the moment it's actually the opposite of true price, because you end up paying more and consumers might not be very much in favor of that yet. And that ties into a follow-up comment from Eric, who says, the consumer doesn't actually exist. I think only 20% of the population could be considered as environmentally conscious when it comes to purchasing. I have no idea whether that percentage is correct, Eric, but what I do know is that environmentally conscious products haven't really taken off yet among the mainstream population. So we're definitely not yet at 100%. There's a lot of work to be done there. Then there are a number of questions that have come in as follow-up questions as well. If you're talking about the reduction of pesticides, and Dania, I think this question is for you. If you're talking about the reduction of pesticides by 50%, should producers then prove their use of pesticides has been reduced as compared to a certain date, or is there another mechanism?
I think what this refers to is the amount that is currently allowed, especially in organic, or I mean both organic and conventional agriculture. Definitely conventional allows more a higher amount of or has lower limits as to the amount of fertilizers or pesticides that you can use in your production. Organic agriculture obviously has much less, but still allows certain substances. And I think this is the baseline. So reducing what is allowed now to 50%. You may choose to make to use as much as you're allowed to, or go even less than that. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And in terms of, there's a comment that came in from, I don't see a first name, but Van Gogh is the last name. Beautiful last name, by the way. That lowering the import duties for sustainable products would be a very good incentive, eventually lowering the end costs for EU consumers. And I think that is definitely something that we need to keep an eye out for, to see if we can lobby. And when I say we, I mean business organizations, business support organizations, but also maybe some government agencies, to see if we can lobby national governments to introduce a wide variety of support mechanisms for producers in other countries outside of the EU. Then there is a question here. Are we now seeing a focus on local production of goods in Europe as a result of the EGD? I don't know who wants to take that question. Arthur, what do you think?
Yeah.
Or Jasmine?
Will there be lower what, Sonia? Sorry, Tonia, I didn't hear.
Is there going to be a focus on local production of goods in Europe as a result of the EGD? So I think that ties into one of the questions I asked at the beginning. Are we going to see a shortening of supply chains? Are we going to see more local production as a result of the EGD?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I'm happy to say my opinion. Sorry, Arthur, I don't know if you wanted to jump in at this.
Please do.
Now.
Ladies first.
Okay. I think some buyers take that approach. Yeah. Unfortunately, I personally don't know that it's sensible. You know, to start cutting up supply chains like that. It will certainly depend on the product. Like Hester said earlier, you know, there are some commodities that have very specific origins. Like you can't just say I want all my stuff from here or from a radius of this many kilometers. So, but I, and of course you will know this as well. Like some buyers do take the approach that the shorter the supply chain, the safer it is now. Again, I provide more questions than answers today. But let's hear what Arthur has to say.
Yeah, I think as a consequence of the EGD, that's probably too early to say that, but we are seeing a shortening of supply chains, reshoring in various of the sectors, particularly also this year. To take an example, the container prices, they've gone up, they've skyrocketed. So I think on the short term, cost is probably the most important factor for reshoring or whatever you call it, nearshoring. On the long term, yeah, it could also be related to the European Green Deal. That's what that's what my guess would be to provide an answer.
Okay, thank you for that, Jasmine and Arthur. And I think we've gone way beyond our end times. I think we're going to start trying to wrap up. We have received a number of questions from our audience asking where they can get more information. And that includes more information about the EGD, like the carbon tax, or more information about being able to get linked to buyers, marketplaces, etc., etc. So for those, I'm not going to tackle those questions individually, but I'm going to say to our audience, you'll find a lot of information on the CBI website. And we also have a question from Alain who says, I'm very much in favor, and I'm taking this as the last question, I'm very much in favor of a green economy and working hard to realize one with my feet on the ground in rural Ghana. How can we align and work together? And I think Alain is referring to CBI. How can we prevent that policy developed in Brussels doesn't frustrate 10 years of work on the ground in West Africa? And Arta, I think this might be a very good segue to you leading our audience to the website of CBI and giving a little information about what information can be found and possible opportunities for collaboration.
Yes, sure. I have one more slide about this.
Yes, and I'm transferring presentation rights to you now.
So I'm not sure if it's on screen right now, but so people can, after this webinar, visit the website if they like. The web address is www.cbi.eu/market information. So at CBI, we provide market information for 14 sectors, and you see them on screen. I won't name them all also because we're really over time, but let me just also take just this last minute to show the website itself and show where you can find the study. So give you a little bit of heads up. So I'm going to CBI website. CBI website, we're celebrating 50 years. Go to market information. Here you see what we've just seen on screen. Actually, in almost all of the sectors we have, you will find, if you scroll a little bit down, sector information, and then under other sector information, you will find a study about the EU Green Deal. How will it impact my business? That's it. Also, if you have any additional questions on this, what you can also do is click the Ask Your Question button on the right of the study, and you will be happy to answer you and help you with that. Back to you, Tonia.
Thank you, Arta. And I think, may I ask our panel to come back online for just a second? Thank you. I think all that's left is for me to say thank you to our experts. So thank you, Hester, thank you, Diana, thank you, Jasmine, for participating in the panel, and thank you, Arta, for joining the panel as well. You don't often do that, so it's been a pleasure to have you. Thank you to the CBI support team who has been in the background answering questions and dealing with any technical issues that have come up. And for our audience, I'd like to say thank you for being here. Thank you for being patient. We actually still have a huge amount of our attendees present in the webinar. So thank you very much for your patience and for staying with us for so long. And I'm just trying to click away a screen that has shown up, but which hopefully you are not seeing. Yeah. So for next time, in case, I think we have answered all the questions that came in, but in case you have additional questions based on what our panel has said, or in case you read the study, the EGD study, and you end up with more questions than answers, you have a second opportunity to be a part of the webinar about the EGD. We are hosting a second webinar on the 2nd of November at 4 p.m. Amsterdam time. So in case you know someone who couldn't make it, in case you have more questions, in case you come up with additional questions, please do join us. We are happy to give you more information. Before you leave us, we are going to ask you to fill out a quick survey. We'd like to hear from you how you think we have done today, where and when we can improve, for example. And finally, as Arta said, do take a look at the website. Do immerse yourself in the research that we've done about the EGD. And finally, you are going to be receiving an email with a link to the recording of this webinar, with a link to the presentation and a link to the market study. Once again, thank you all for participating. Thank you all for being here, and maybe see you next time. Have a wonderful day. Goodbye.
Bye.